In this episode, we speak with Jay Milliken, Senior Partner at Profit, where he advises global companies on customer-driven growth strategies. Jay brings more than 20 years of experience helping leading brands strengthen customer relationships, build strategic brand assets, and align growth strategies with customer behavior and insights across industries. Jay was recognized as one of the top 25 M&A Consultants and Leaders of 2024. Profit is a global consulting firm known for driving uncommon growth by combining strategy, creativity, and innovation to help leading businesses transform and thrive in dynamic markets. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the Executive Chairman of Market Insight Media and the Managing Partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Great Entrepreneurs, a podcast for driven entrepreneurs and business owners. Our podcast covers all topics related to the entrepreneurial journey, from ideation to execution to optimization and to reaping the rewards of a well-run business. In the minutes ahead, we'll share with you unique insights and tactics from some of today's most accomplished and inspiring entrepreneurs.
Jay, thanks so much for taking the time. It's a delight to be with you.
Happy to be with you. Looking forward to this.
So where should we start? You've worked with some iconic brands, and maybe, you could tell me, looking at your portfolio, UGG kind of immediately popped out to me. I'm not sure if you worked on that directly, but maybe kick us off with your favorite brand that you've worked with.
Well, that's like asking me who my favorite child is. So I did not work on UGG. That was very cool. I don't think I'm cool enough to actually work on such a cool brand. But, I think over my career, I've been fortunate to work on a large number of brands. And actually, what I found is some of the brands that from the outside might not seem the most exciting or the sexiest brands actually are the most interesting to work on, because they don't have that inherent equity. They don't have that sort of name recognition. Sometimes they may not have such a sophisticated approach to brand or marketing or growth that it's a lot of fun to work on. So I think some of the things that I've done that I'm super proud of and that generate a lot of chatter is we helped redesign Cathay Pacific's loyalty program, really shifting them into an entirely new sort of way of approaching loyalty because their program wasn't aligned with really driving economic value, right? They were giving status to people that didn't really necessarily earn it or have the right behavior. So we did a lot of really fundamental, deep analytics to understand what drove profitable behavior in the airline, in their sort of airline route network and their structure, and then oriented the program around that. That was super fun. I think some of the other things I'd love to talk about, maybe more in the old times, is we helped launch the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. I'm not sure if you've ever stayed at that hotel or not, but at that time it was post 2009 financial crisis, and that property was supposed to be condominiums on the strip, and the developer went bankrupt and gave it back to the financial lender. So now there was a German investment bank that owned a Las Vegas casino. And it was a casino that was independent. It was on the corner of Main Street, first in Main Street in Las Vegas, right in the center of the strip. And we were given a lot of creative license to go in and totally reinvent the whole experience and come up with amazing concepts and branding. And, our team stayed on through the launch. And eventually people were seconded to the property. And then some people even actually joined the property after that full time. And so it's subsequently been sold to MGM. But it was a fantastic process where we really entered when the building was going up. It had a name, and we had to give that name meaning. We developed a loyalty program again there for an independent casino. So how do you do that in a differential way? And it was super interesting because the whole premise of that casino was the rise of non-gaming spend in Las Vegas. And so really we oriented the property and the loyalty program around equally valuing an equal experiential value to non-gaming. So restaurants and bars, other elements, not just the gaming floor. And so it's fun to go back. I was back there last year just to go back and walk around and to look at things that you helped create and to see that it's still getting a lot of buzz. So I'm fortunate, having been with Profit for almost 22 years, that I've got a ton of experience. I could go on for hours and hours, probably not what you want, but there's a ton of really great experiences like that have just been quite memorable.
It's super interesting. And I actually do remember the Cosmopolitan. I was actually working in investment banking at a bank that was advising. This is a completely random coincidence, but I was in the group that was
Yeah.
working on that transaction at the time. One thing that occurred to me as you were talking is that a client could potentially come to you and say, "Hey, we need help on positioning the brand in this market, and here's our idea." But the way you described your involvement, your capabilities actually go pretty deep. They can come to you with that sort of broad scope, and you can unpack that and help them to the extent of like, okay, let's go into the non-casino or non-gambling spend. Let's explore that. Let's see how else we can build out. So tell us about Profit and the extent of its capabilities.
So at our heart, we have brand at our core DNA based on, our vice chairman is Dave Ocker. He is, I call him like the godfather of branding. He invented concepts that everyone takes for granted, like brand is an actual asset that a company has. He did the house of brands to branded house spectrum. And he's such an amazing thinker around the concept of brand. And when I joined the firm 22 years ago, we were just a brand and marketing firm. And the best compliment we'd get would be to be called like the Bain or the McKinsey of brand and marketing. But over the last 22 years, like we've grown in different ways. And a lot of that has been places our clients and asked us to get involved in. So now I see us much more as a growth consultancy. And, we focus only on top line. So we don't do cost cutting and efficiency, operating efficiency. I've worked in management consulting before. I rode the internet bubble up as a management consultant and I rode it down. And so I've done that type of consulting and it was not fun, for me at least. And I think so what's great about Profit is that we have purposely built the firm at the intersection of strategy, creativity, and experience. So I think that allows us to do things in a very different way. I think we show up and do lots of brand work in that way. That's still one of the core things we do, but we're also doing a lot of more marketing. So right after you build the brand, like how do you then get the economic engine of the company going? We do a lot of experiences because brands aren't just physical products anymore, they're experiences. I've done a lot of work in casinos and travel and hospitality. And yes, there is a physical element to some of that, but a lot of it is more experiential. So we do that. And then we've also believed that, the way to activate the strategy for many companies, especially experienced companies, is through people. And so we do a lot of culture and organizational work over time as well. So the firm has really grown. And so where we used to almost list, hey, we do brand, marketing, innovation, and it just became too long to sort of talk about what we do. Now we really focus on the idea of growth. And our sort of take on that is uncommon growth. And that's like, how can you grow faster than your competitors in the market? And really, how do you unlock that sort of sustainable in terms of repeatable over many years type of growth? Once we talk about that, there's lots of doors you can enter into growing. You can use your brand to grow. You can use marketing to grow. A lot of what we do is customer driven. We have an amazing insights team inside our firm. And so everything we do really starts with an outside in perspective. So a lot of stuff does have a brand angle to it. And oftentimes it can start that way. But then I think our relationships grow because we have capabilities to go much deeper. We have people that are very analytical. We have amazing creative designers. And so we continue to sort of grow in new ways where clients are asking us to, hey, can you help us with this? And we're like, sure. And then we start to grow in really cool ways.
What I thought was interesting is that you have such a wide range of sectors that you work with. So you could do a consumer goods company and you could also work with a cybersecurity company. And so is it just a matter of switching hats and saying like, okay, what's the objective for this cybersecurity brand? And how do we create all this content around it or branding around it? How do you approach such different sectors?
I think that sort of opportunity has to do a little bit with our size. Like at our size of company, which is about 600 consultants, we have a few specialties where people specialize by industry, but a lot more of us are generalists. And so I think the red thread that sort of connects through that could be, how do you do customer-driven brand strategy or customer-driven growth? And the mechanics of doing that are fairly similar, regardless of whether you're doing a cybersecurity company or you're doing a hotel or you're doing, a food ingredient company. Like they are fundamentally, it starts with the customer, whoever that customer or core stakeholders are, understanding what their fundamental needs are, both the ones that are core to driving purchase, but also some that are completely unmet, right? And that's a lot of times where we unlock real growth is through that unmet need or where there's frustrations. An example of that is we did work for T-Mobile and really helped unlock the idea of uncarrier. And that was really built around finding that unmet need of people were frustrated by their contracts. If you remember back, a decade ago, where everybody was locked into contracts and they were impossible to get out of, we were able to work with T-Mobile at a point in time where, they had a failed merger with Sprint. They did not have the iPhone, and they were in a little bit more of a crisis mode, and they were willing to make big bets. And so they were okay when we came back and said the brand idea is really pain-free wireless. And the biggest pain point that people have is the contract. They're like, yeah, let's rip up the contracts. So regardless of whether you're working in telecommunications or something else, you really have to start with that deep understanding of the customer and who they are, what is the context in which they're living their lives in, what ways do the products or services meet their needs. And that can be a B2B customer, it could be a general consumer. But fundamentally, that process of going deep into customers and consumers, understanding their needs, and then pulling insights out of that can be applied across a lot of different industries. You could be talking about in a food ingredient, like where you're going and talking to people that buy train loads of flour or train loads of salt. They still have needs. They still are looking for reliability and quality and all those things. And you have to be able to dig deep and find out what those needs are and what are some of the barriers, and then level that back up to like, what is that idea for, whether it could be a brand, it could be a value proposition, it could be a new service offering. How do we unlock more growth from those customers based on their needs?
And now turning maybe internal to Profit itself, given that you've been there for over 2 decades, you've probably seen the firm grow. And how have you been able to maintain kind of the quality of your offering to clients while growing the overall business? I assume talent recruitment is integral. How have you been able to help in that regard?
We have an amazing commitment to internal growth. And that can prove challenging in high growth times because obviously you can't scale junior talent really quickly. But having been here, 20 plus years, I have seen the growth trajectory of people that have entered straight out of college and have progressed up to join our partner ranks. So I think that there is such a commitment to that growing internal talent that has helped us really become successful. And I spent some time in Europe. I spent 4 years in London helping grow our European business. I spent 6 years in Asia growing our Asian business. And especially in Asia, it was hard to hire in people from the outside and then teach them the secret of how to deliver in the profit way. And so the firm was really smart in terms of, having me go over there and then supporting me with moving a couple other people over to really teach by working side by side. So bringing in managers to then manage projects and to do that knowledge transfer, because we are still a small, scrappy firm. We have great training programs internal, but we're not the machine of some of the larger consultancies that have learning campuses and fly people in from around the world. A lot of our learning is still on the job learning. And so I think the best way to do that, regardless of whether you're bringing somebody up through the ranks or hiring them in external, is really the collaborative way that we approach teaming and selling, really pulling people in together to work and sort of mentor. The people are the secret to profit, success, and the reason why I've stayed for so long. And I think there's just a commitment to helping people grow and helping people have these learning experiences.
Mm-hmm. And as you're kind of recruiting and assessing maybe your internal talent, are there qualities that you look for? Is there maybe a top 1 or 2 qualities that when you're interviewing them, they're a good candidate?
Yeah, obviously some of that varies by level. I think there's an inherent intellectual curiosity, but I think most people that enter into consulting have that intellectual curiosity where they're not looking to do the same thing over and over again. So I do think that's always a baseline there. When I'm interviewing very junior consultants, I often ask them what their favorite brand is. And if they give me an easy answer, like they say, Apple, I'm like, you have to be a little bit more curious and a little bit more thoughtful than just give me a very simple answer that you could get off of a quick Google search. There's also, I think, even though we've grown and I joined the firm, we were 65 people. Now we're 600 people. There's an inherent scrappiness, I think, to profit. We compete against the big players and we win a little bit because we are a little bit more committed, a little bit more scrappy. We find ways to do things. And so I like to test that a lot, especially as you go up into higher levels and higher partners and people that are generating business, because we are independent. We aren't part of a big network. We are well known just in some circles, but not as nearly as well known as some of the people we compete against. And so you really have to have that scrappy nature to be successful and to be able to get up and do things and to compete against players that are much bigger than you. And sometimes even compete against the smaller players that say they can do the same things as you, but obviously can't, even though they offer like prices that are much lower. So I like to have a little bit of that scrappiness. And then, I think a lot of it is like how well prepared people are, like the types of questions that they ask, like did they do their homework and do their research, or are they just going through the motions? So.
One thing that struck me maybe slightly different than the big consultancies and Profit is that with your line of work, the type of projects you're on, that creativity plays a role. Like, how do you present something to the client that they've never thought of, or that maybe you were able to get ideas from a very particular area that was overlooked, was not in the popular or the mainstream media, but you have people, this talent, this bench of talent that thinks differently and that can come up with these ideas. Is that the case, or am I just making that up?
No, I mean, creativity is a huge part of our business. And as I said, like we've built the firm at this intersection of strategy, creativity, and experience. And I do think there's lots of times we come in with very creative ideas. But I think regardless of whether it's, we're doing like visual design or we're doing more innovation, for us, it's always strategy led. So oftentimes, like when I'm talking to clients and we're talking about, oh, well, they want a new visual system for their brand, we have to help them understand, like, it's not art. Like it has to be grounded in strategy. And so I think even the most creative ideas, you have to come back to, is it meeting an unmet need for the customers? Does it sort of help you deliver against your strategy? And so everything we do comes back to being strategy led. You can have amazing visual design that's award winning, and there's lots of agencies out there that will try to win awards, but we are fundamentally focused on delivering impact for our clients. In order to do that, you have to go back to, why are they doing this, right? What is the fundamental strategic goal they have? Like, are they trying to add new customers? Are they trying to deepen share of wallet? Are they trying to plug a leaky bottom of the funnel bucket where they don't have retention? So understanding what the strategy is, and then understanding where customers or consumers or whoever is going to be interacting with this new product, service, experience, brand, what their needs are, you fundamentally ground it in there. And then you use that as a springboard for creativity. And you tell people, well, there's a spectrum of ideas that we have here, right? There's things that are very near in, that are very consistent to what you're doing, but there's like, hey, this idea or this need has the ability to flex in lots of different ways. And so I think a lot of it comes down to storytelling. I can't imagine ever going to a client and saying, we only have one idea and it's like a super crazy idea. Like, that's not why a firm would hire us. I think what we'd say is like, we have this idea for you around your brand, or we have an idea for you around your loyalty program, and there's things you can do that are very easy to achieve. And there's something like this, but this idea has flexibility. It's a platform for you to grow, and you could do things as far out as this. And so I think our job as consultants is to help people understand how to push their thinking, right? If they wanted to keep on doing things the way that they were doing it, and they have been doing it previously, they wouldn't hire an outside advisor to come in, or at least not the type of company that we are. So I think a lot of that is, if you ground it in strategy and you ground it in the customer and the needs of the customer, then you can present a range of ideas. They'll feel like they're either on brand or they're on strategy. And so oftentimes we use the strategy as a filter, the brand as a filter, the customer needs as a filter for then what the recommendation is.
We're coming up on time. I have two final questions. Before I ask these two final questions, give us a sense for the range of clients that you work with in terms of size. It sounds like you work with a lot of large enterprises, but maybe you work with also boutique hotels. So like, can you give us a sense for the...
I mean, I've ranged in the firm's raised from pre-revenue startups to Fortune 50, Fortune 20, biggest companies in the world, right? And we like that because sometimes, big companies can learn a lot from these smaller, scrappier startups that are doing things with less, because oftentimes they're being asked to do with less. And I think smaller companies can learn from the way that like big companies have systematically grown and approached brand and marketing innovation or experience as a way to do it. And so I think the range of company sizes and then the range of industries, I feel like makes me a better consultant, because I can walk in and link things in and say, hey, well, you know your company and maybe you know your competitors, but at the further you get away from your industry, there are learnings that you can have around what other companies are doing that you can then apply into yours. And we actually, when we do work sessions, we have an innovation tool we use called Thief and Doctor. So we present like not only what you're doing inside your industry, but then we go broader and we say, well, can we steal any ideas from these other industries that are trying to achieve something? Can we take the essence of it and doctor it up and change it and make it more applicable for your industry? And that's one reason why I've chosen not to be focused in a certain industry. We have healthcare experts and financial services experts, and actually those industries are broad enough, but I love the variety. And I love being able to say, hey, I did something for this bank in Vietnam, but I think it will apply to this food ingredient company in North America. And like that idea of like taking that experience of what they did and how they chose to focus on a customer group and really become more digital, and how can we then bring that back over here? That I think is a lot of fun. So
excellent. Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
I'll keep it focused on work, but I was fortunate enough after my MBA to take a little bit of a non-traditional route to consulting. And I ended up working for Sears Roebuck, and an internal consulting role that was staffed with a bunch of former consultants, but a lot of ex-Bain consultants. And the person leading that department was a woman by the name of Shan Atkins. She had led the retail practice at Bain. And she continues to be a mentor to me that I stay connected to. But I went from a MBA graduate to being in with some high-performing Bain consultants. And I remember some of my early reviews. I've kept them. I remember some of the decks that I would get back that were edited, where she had just edited them. And you couldn't see the slides sometimes for the red ink that was on them. It was a challenging but supportive environment. But I went up the learning curve so quickly with Shan and some of the other consultants that I worked at there. There were other consultancies as well, but it was like the perfect storm of an environment to learn in. I was in way over my head. I probably didn't deserve to be in amongst those. She obviously saw something in me that I didn't, but that environment and that, just the challenge of every day trying to come in and prove that I was worthy of being on that team. And you'd say, well, to be at Sears Roebuck in the late 90s is probably not the most sexy industry, but once again, it comes down to fundamentally to the people. And the people that I was working in and the opportunities I had, I go back to those learnings, maybe not every day, but definitely every week, and think about, I learned that way back when in that environment.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Between working and having 4 kids, I probably don't have as much that I'm doing, but I've over the last few years been helping lead Profit's work into sustainability. And so I've really enjoyed the ability to work on some of those projects. So I would say definitely the ones I've been working on most recently have been more climate focused. So I think that's something I'm really interested in. And I did some work in solar. I've done some work in some hydrogen fuel cells. And I just think the opportunity to take something that I'm good at, right, which is helping companies grow and applying that to something that's going to hopefully change the world and change the world for better is something I'm hoping to do more of. But I really think it would be focus on trying to make the world a better place for my kids and focusing more on the environment, just given where I live in Vancouver, I get to stare at the ocean and stare at the forest every day. And so it gives me a little bit of incentive to make sure that those environments are cleaner and better for my kids and for everyone's kids as they continue to grow.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good note to end on. Jay, I want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much.